Hey guys, welcome back. It's the Community Fitness Podcast. We are joined today by Coach Emily, Jordan Rudolph, founder of Unity Fitness, host of the Community Fitness Podcast, and we've been MIA for a few weeks. We haven't been on in like 3 weeks, I think, maybe four.
Yeah.
4th of July, Perform Better, Mastermind. Week before was our previous one. 4 weeks. That was 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's been a month. So we'll kind of consider this like season 2, right? Season 2, and I don't even remember how these things go, but we're gonna make them work. That's why she's here today, to keep us on track and to cover the topic that we're talking about, which is alcohol. I do know that we need to talk about what's going on at Unity Fitness first, and then we'll kind of carry over into the subject on today's discussion. So let's see. On Monday, July 15th, I believe it is the start of our Stronger Than Yesterday challenge. And that is for any member to do it. It's coming on in. It's doing a program based on something that you want to set a PR in. And then it's setting that PR. And we're going to basically do like a lifting meet, whatever you want to call it, on Saturday, August 24th, that you're going to show up here with everybody else that's participating and then crush your PR in front of everybody. We're going to get on video and all that other cool stuff. But you got to be a member at Unity Fitness to participate. So get your butt in here. If you haven't been in here yet, to come and do that. Or if you're a member watching this, you have until tonight to let us know what your PR is if you haven't yet. Because we, the program design team, and Katie, who's out in the room right now, we have to have some time to get that program built, preferably not at Sunday at like 6 o'clock, and then having it printed off by like 5 a.m.
Ideally, yes.
Yes, we want our weekends too. So get that to us tonight. On Wednesday, July 24th, we're doing a kettlebell workshop instead of our core class that night. Honestly, guys, this is more for you. This is for our members. This is for anybody who's wanted a more in-depth look at just a kettlebell swing and the specifics behind it. But after we went through the Strong First certification, and like it was something where I talked about this before too, and you talked about it before too. I've been doing kettlebell swings for like 6 years, and I still was getting corrected on the weekend that we were there, right? And I looked back on videos just yesterday of us taking our kind of like our snapshots of the timeline of us preparing for this Strong First certification, and seeing my swings then to what they are now was a totally different thing. And it was a 12-week thing, and I've been doing this for 6 years. I know you had a similar experience too.
Yeah, for sure. I did the same thing every so often. I'll like look at it and like, ooh.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. Like,
yeah.
Always improving for sure.
So what we wanted to do is create this workshop, and we've been trying to do this for months. I'm not kidding you. We've been trying to set this up since like May. We just haven't had a good weekend to do it or a good time to do it, which is why we're just now doing it on a weekday, to just show our members how to do the kettlebell swing in a more in-depth look, where it's really hard to do that like consistently. Seeing them once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. But we're just going to take an hour and go through it. And then on Thursday, July 25th, we are starting our first event, community event. That's going to be an ongoing thing every few Thursdays, maybe every Thursday. We'll see what happens. The Gym Hair Don't Care Happy Hour. So we're working out and we're not showering. We're going in our gym hair, and we're going to go have some beers. And we're going to have a little happy hour for the Unity Fitness clan. And you can bring friends to that if you want to. It's going to be a free class, and then the drinks are on you. Okay, we're not providing that. And our first one is going to be at Bodega, and if it hasn't popped up yet, you'll see that event pop up probably any second. And it should be up and running, so you'll see that the Gym Hair Don't Care Happy Hour. So we'll see you there. Make sure you look out for those events. Anyway, I think that's everything that's really going on right now. 100 Workout Challenge started a couple weeks ago, last week, whatever it was, 11 days ago. So we're kicking off that. You'll see a lot of that coming through, and that goes on to the end of the year. So there's still time, if you haven't started yet, to get here and get started on that. But yeah, holy cats. I think that's about everything.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think you got it all.
Yeah, sweet. So here's the deal. We're talking alcohol today because there's nothing better than the triple Bs in the summer in the Midwest, specifically in La Crosse, because that's where we are and that's where you're watching this from most likely. And triple Bs are the beers, burgers, and barbecues. So we're having a lot of that going on right now. Beers, brats, and barbecues. Beers, burgers, and barbecues, whatever you want to use that other B for. But more importantly, it's just alcohol intake in general. So we want to cover everything that potentially is good about it, health-wise, and we'll just say health-wise for right now. The bad, and then I don't know, whatever else comes out of our mouth. Henceforth, the hiccups. So we'll go from there. Obviously, you guys know a lot about alcohol already, but maybe there's some stuff that we can still learn, help you learn today, just from like our knowledge of nutrition. We've both done some research on it recently, so we're just gonna kind of go over from there, and we'll jump right into maybe what we deem as I don't want to get too sciencey right away, so let's go more general stuff. Let's go more general and like maybe how alcohol. Let's talk about the health stuff, like you found earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that first comes to mind without getting like too sciencey is like how much we're drinking always plays a factor. Obviously, what we're drinking, whether we're male, female, how big we are, that kind of stuff, all plays a factor as well. But a lot of people tend to underestimate how much they drink, like in a week. And I'll post the link after, but I found a cool infographic from Precision Nutrition that kind of talked about, as they specifically use a woman. So for a woman, moderate drinking, they said was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you get home from work and have a glass of wine or a beer. Add on to that would be your moderate drinking. Add on a little bit more, say Friday night, you go out for happy hour and have a couple drinks. Instead of, your normal Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That Friday you swap that out for happy hour. That would be more moderate to heavy. And then even further, say then also in addition to that Saturday, you have a birthday party for a friend and you go out and have, however many drinks there, a handful of there. And that kind of puts you already into that heavy category, as opposed to like in our minds. And I tend to do this as well. Like you think, oh, I haven't drank that much. I really only drank Saturday, but we forget about those little things along the way as well. And they just kind of add up. So I think always being mindful of what we're consuming and how much we're consuming and taking the time to enjoy that drink, whatever it may be, is kind of that first step to like recognizing like the alcohol and its kind of potential effects that we'll kind of get into later down the line here. So that's a big one.
That awareness and mindfulness is something that we see a lot in food tracking as well, right? So we're always not aware of like how much we're eating or the snacks that we have or the food intake, what time we're doing, because it's just so unconsciously done. It totally makes sense in the alcohol side of things. And usually when we think about it, we just think about the ones that we had on the weekend. We don't think about the ones if we go out to eat during the week, or if we have a glass of wine with our meals during the week. We don't usually think about it. And then if you go to like a medical or health insurance type of thing, anything that kind of like asks you questions on how much you drink per week, it's asking you what it is per week, right? It's not asking you what it is per day, it's per week. And you kind of sit there and think about it, and that's where we also probably underestimate too. Like they probably know if you say 5 to 7 that you actually meant 7 or more. If we say 3 to 5, it probably means more of like 5 to 7. So there's those gaps that kind of go through there,
right?
And following suit with it. And that's also I know that we talk about like how many you're drinking, like maybe servings, right? Or not servings, but yeah, content wise, but the serving that you're drinking is probably different too. Like we always talk about, like the saddest thing is like when you actually see like the size of a tablespoon of peanut butter and you like cry over it.
Yeah.
When you actually see the serving size of a glass of wine, which I think is 6 ounces.
Yeah.
Or 4 ounces. 5 ounces.
Yeah.
You see how big it is or how small it is. It's actually like another sad day, right? Because a lot of us like that extra little pour in there that kind of gets us over that serving size as well.
Right, for sure. I remember like when we were in college and stuff, I had one of my roommates at the time was starting to compete in powerlifting, and she started like actually measuring out her wine that she would drink, and I was like, oh boy. And I think that was like one of the first times, I'm not like a huge drinker, but that was one of the first times I like saw the actual serving size and like what she was drinking versus like what we would just pour into a glass. And yeah, it was crazy. It was definitely eye opening to see, and like we all kind of justify like, oh, it's one glass, but kind of like Jordan talked about with the tablespoon of peanut butter, like, oh yeah, I only had one serving of peanut butter, as opposed to like one knifeful is not one serving of peanut butter that we spread on, you know, toast or whatnot. So
right, yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's always way more. And and there's been different measures or intensities of alcohol that have come out recently with wine. I don't know if it's so much because I'm not a huge wine guy, but I know like there's proofs in your spirits, and then now there's all these different types of craft beers that are out there, where before we probably just mentioned this as like a Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Light type of thing, 4% alcohol, where now we have these double IPAs that are 8+, and we have a standard craft beers which is usually like 6+, or these imperials, or these really big beers that are like over 10-12%, you know, per ounce or per drink, by volume, and they're served in different sizes. That's for sure. You know, goblets and 8-ounce goblets, 10-ounce goblets, and whatever else. But that's not the same as like a standard serving of alcohol that we'd see in the measuring world.
Right. Yeah. Once we get into those like 12%, like there's definitely beers that are out there, especially the craft ones, with that becoming more popular, that kind of get into that 12%, and that's kind of like getting into almost like the alcohol content of wine. So you should, like, technical serving size, if you're taking into account that ABV is going to be like 5 ounces in a one drink per the text like research scenario.
Yeah.
That's like one drink, as opposed to like, you know, one beer. You say one beer, it's really like 1.5-ish, you know,
always
kind of gets up there. So if you take that into account.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah,
right? Like,
that's what I was just saying. You have to take time to think about what we just said there.
Yeah.
Right. So don't lose sight of us talking so much in depth of this, where you lose sight of what we're trying to also say with being mindful and aware of, like, knowing that as humans, not just you watching this, like, we are part of this too. It's a humanized thing. We do this, you know, we are not keeping track of that, and we will do the same thing. That is just what's called human nature.
Right.
And writing things down, food logging, or keeping track of it that way, even if it's just keeping track of that for a week, will help you out a ton and give you more awareness for that.
For sure.
Let's go into health. Let's go into health risk stuff. Let's just talk about that first, and then we can kind of fit our way in through like fitness and everything else after that. Yeah. So let's go through like health risks, or maybe health benefits. that whole glass of wine better than a cardio, or 30 minutes of cardio every day. Not really true.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's go over that.
Yeah, I think like first and foremost, the one that comes to mind just like from a fitness perspective is just that like disinhibition. What's the word? Disinhibition. Yep. So you kind of lose sight of maybe what your goals are. You're just not coming back to that mindlessness thing. You're not really thinking then about like what's forefront. You know, loss of control, lack of concentration, different things like that. There's all different trade-offs when we drink, depending on how much we drink. Once we get into that like heavier drinking category, a lot of different health benefits or health risks, start to come into play, as far as like heart health, cardiovascular health, all those kind of things kind of take hits there. So definitely staying below that line is going to be first and foremost from an overall life standpoint, as well as especially like a fitness standpoint, for sure.
Yeah.
A couple drinks here and there, obviously there's benefits. Socially, I suppose, if that's what you enjoy to do, that connection with people, but definitely keeping top of mind why you're drinking, as opposed to just doing it to drink. First and foremost.
Yeah, there's a lot out there that'll show, like there was that whole big study that the news took and ran with several years ago about how a glass of wine is better than doing cardio, an hour of cardio every day. And what they saw from that was how basically heart health. I mean, it was in terms of like what cardio can do for your heart and whatnot too. And for the fact of the matter, the cardio that was compared in that study that we're referencing right now, that blew up all over social media and everything else, and every so often gets recycled. The cardio that they used in that was like really, really, really basic, steady state, not really great type of cardio. It was like something where you could just sit and kind of do for an hour and not really get anything out of it because the person wasn't really working. Compared to the red wine and what's the word in it? Mandy knows this. She's watching right now and she's probably screaming at the camera the word I'm thinking of, but it's the word that kind of helps your red blood cells and your blood vessels, your dilation, your nitric oxide stuff. There's a word for it. Again, Mandy's yelling at me. She's screaming right now. I'm surprised I can't hear her from a couple miles away on what this word is. It'll come back to me maybe later on in the podcast, but essentially they were measuring the tracking markers of that nitric oxide into that, and that how the red wine can help alleviate that during a certain amount of time in that test. Where cardiovascular, like it's a more long-term thing, where they were kind of tracking it based on like their 6 or 12 week study and taking blood samples and everything else. Mm-hmm. So don't read out of context out of that. If there's ever something that's coming across, by the way, on like your news station or New York Times and like what they're telling you, it's probably taken out of context a little bit. So send it to us. Like I love reading those too, because A, I love reading research. B, I like kind of seeing what they're actually saying and what's actually being done and said. So it's not to prove anybody wrong, but sometimes they're just taken out of context. A lot of times that's why they don't allow you to record at presentations, because if you record like a 10-second blip of what happened, it's taken out of the whole hour-long lecture that you're at, and it's taken out of context. For sure. Same thing that the news does with some of these studies.
Right. Something I read is funny because I was looking that up, and something I read that one of those things that like kind of got lost in that whole social media uproar about that article specifically was a lot of fitness experts and health experts in general recommend that if you're not drinking currently, like don't start drinking for health benefits, right? Like it's not something where you should add this in. It's if you're already there, then they showed this study, but people just immediately cut that from most of what was said too. So not only is that part, questionable at best, but that whole first like don't start drinking for this reason was just completely like pushed out of that too. So that was kind of interesting. I didn't know that first part when I was reading too. So
that's super interesting how you say it. It's got my mind racing. What's the standard or normal moderate intake that we're supposed to have? Did you come across that at all?
So for females, moderate intake would be no more than 1 drink a day for the week, with no more than 3 drinks on any given day. So that's females.
Yeah, make sure
and
you
understand. And then males is a little bit higher than that. I believe it's 1.5 or 2, somewhere in that range, as opposed to the 1. Yeah.
And probably no more than like 4 in a given day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's some health benefits to that, right? There's some stuff that it does for the heart. There's some stuff that it kind of does in the body that essentially just help. I'm not going to say like detoxifying or anything of that sort. Like we don't actually know that, but there's some stuff towards it. There's plenty of risks that go along with it though too, and we're not going to sit here and tell you all of those. Like most of them. What we want to be reminding you of in the risk side of things is more maybe along the lines of like the health fitness side of things, where we can talk a little bit about cortisol levels. We can talk a little bit about appetite control, performance, recovery, which is a big one. Maybe we can touch base on those a little bit. Yeah. More in depth for like what we're doing here. So we can. What do you want to go with? Appetite first, or cortisol? Either one.
Whatever you feel.
Well, we can just say this in cortisol stuff, right? A lot of times, alcohol could be consumed as a coping mechanism of some sort, right? And that could have been something that's been deep rooted in your life from when you were like a teenager or very young adult, where it had a stronger emotional tie, which then it became a very, very influential thing based on habitual actions. Like it became a super strong habit that just cannot shake because it's so deep rooted into a past moment. White wine and beer show less cortisol development and help suppress appetite, help like keep back your appetite. They suppress a hunger thing a little bit less than like red wine and spirits do. Long term, no matter what type of alcohol you're drinking, they all show an increase in cortisol in the body long term. But red wine and beer are a little bit more like short term beneficial on the cortisol side of things and appetite side of things, where like red wine has a stronger release of chemicals in the body that makes you hungry and makes it kind of like a continuous hunger, and not quite as much cortisol as spirits. And then spirits have a little bit more of that high cortisol part, but a little bit less of the hunger part. But those are both kind of like two that are jacked up a little bit compared to like white wine and beer. And basically it's the bitterness of the white wine and beer that are actually said to kind of like hold that appetite kind of at bay. Long term wise, if we're building more cortisol, that means we're building more stress. Stress is cortisol, cortisol is stress in the body hormone wise, where long term that could then potentially lead us to having more drinks to try and feel better, but then actually make us feel worse long term that way.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Potential. And that could then develop over time into something that's a little bit more out of our jurisdiction, talking about this podcast and kind of acting like we're experts on it, because that's not our realm at all.
Yeah.
So health wise, that's kind of where it could go. Appetite, I guess I kind of covered both right there.
Right.
Cortisol and appetite. But typically, like when we drink more, it's really hard to say no to things. So it's oftentimes like what you're eating as you're drinking. It's not so much the alcohol that always does it. It's a lot of times what we're eating with it, right? What we're doing with it.
Yeah, I think it's very, very difficult to say like, oh, I'm going to have, this a couple of drinks with friends, and then, everyone's ordering food and you order, your salad with lean protein. Like that's not usually the choice that's made. Sometimes it's a little bit of a healthier option if they have something small to snack on, but a lot of times, a lot of places, opt for that like bar food style thing. So I think that's where we can run into a lot more issues with just calorie control in general, where it's not necessarily the alcohol, but it's what follows and or in conjunction with that, which pushes us, especially if we have like a fat loss goal, into that caloric surplus, and leads to negative implications on our goals in that regard as well. So I think with the appetite thing, it's not necessary. It's not always from the alcohol if we're keeping it, under control in a reasonable amount of drinks. But it's all the food that usually accompanies that too that we kind of have to think about.
Big time knowledge bombs there. All I thought was like, yep. Like I'm writing this down in my head right now, right? Let's talk a little bit more about the fat loss side of things, right? So a lot of times, we'll get a little sciencey here. A lot of times what we thought is that alcohol is actually a fat storage something, that you drink it and you're automatically storing fat, which is not actually the case. When you look at how the body metabolizes alcohol, or ethanol in this case, is what it's called when it's inside the body. It's more of a fat suppressor. So it doesn't store fat unless you're over your caloric intake and then eating food with it, right? There's a lot of those things that go into it, but it's more of a fat suppressor through a decrease in lipid oxidation, which basically means fat mobilization processes. So it just kind of shuts that down because the body works so hard. Yeah, it works. When you drink alcohol, you introduce this new thing. Like your body doesn't know what ethanol really is. It can't really kind of like just like, I'm going to just pop out some ethanol and we're going to use it. It's a substance that is foreign essentially to the body. So the body views it as that, so it's got to get rid of it. So it'll almost halt everything else that it's doing to get that ethanol out of the body, and some of that will increase the metabolism to help it, believe it or not. Like it's a hard thing to break down. It's 7 grams, or sorry, I'm saying that wrong. 1 gram of alcohol is 7 calories. Am I saying that right?
7 calories per gram.
Yeah, 7 calories per gram. There we go. Yeah. So your body wants to break that down because it doesn't really know what to do with it. And then it kind of figures out what to do with it in that process, but it's also elevating the metabolism. Protein does the same thing, right? And your body would rather not use ethanol as fuel because it has to go through so many phases to get to a fuel source, where it would just rather shut everything down and have you kind of pee it out. Yeah. We can go a little bit more in depth in that in a second, but what do you have to add? I feel like I'm getting kind of
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind as well is like when you were talking about like excretion of it, like all the water that goes with it too. Like we kind of take that into account. Oftentimes, we wake up with a hangover the next day, and while the body's doing all that processing to excrete the alcohol, we lose a very significant portion of water. So that's where that hangover comes in as well, which kind of holds us back from
You broke the seal.
Being productive the next day as well. So kind of cutting into those, like if Friday night happy hour cuts into your Saturday morning workout in that way, because you wake up super dehydrated, not to mention all the negative benefits of not being hydrated in general too.
For sure.
Kind of adds into that. So that's where my mind went right away.
For sure. Now
you're talking about that.
It's awfully ironic that we also let this podcast off with our Jim Hair Don't Care happy hour. We're not going there to get smashed. We're going there to have our one or 1.5. Anyway, yes. So like you take that water out, like alcohol is a diuretic. Caffeine's the same way, right? And your body wants to kind of help excrete it, and that's where the volume of your excretion can increase, and then you get rid of the water that's helping you do everything else. And if you are a very avid exerciser, you're into fitness stuff, that basically takes away from all of like the water that's surrounding your muscles.
Yep.
And how your muscles function. So you could be underhydrated and therefore underperforming after those nights like that, especially if there's over like those X amount of drinks. The process of like this going through it and kind of touching base more on what Emily's saying to you, because we told you it's a fat suppressor. It's not going to make everything just fat storage or anything of that nature, but it's a fat suppressor. So it basically turns fat burning off. If you're eating food with that and you're already fat burning is turned off, that probably means that your body's signaling a couple of the things that'll probably say fat storing could happen if there's an kind of like increase in energy intake, food intake, right? So that's where kind of like that whole alcohol increases fat intake came into play. With that said about the performance side of things and like how a person can be underhydrated, there's a lot of stuff too in the recovery aspects of what alcohol can do. And I'm going to screw this up, and I meant to look it up again, but I'm pretty sure the neurotransmitter is called rotonin or something like that, retinin or rotonin. Essentially, it's a chemical that's released in your brain that kind of tells you like there's some stuff that blocks it, and it basically makes it where we're not tired right now, right? Or maybe we are tired, depending on who you are. But at closer to night, like those chemicals get a little bit less and less, so the rotonin kind of seeks into the body that then tells the brain it's time to go to sleep, and that's where we get tired and kind of fall asleep because we're relaxed and these chemicals happen. Alcohol causes the I think it like causes the uptake or the reuptake of one of these chemicals that blocks that. So basically lets all the rotonin go through, and that's where we get so tired when we drink alcohol. That's where people pass out. But then if you drink too much and kind of go through that pass out stage, you actually go into more of like a comatose like state rather than an actual sleep state. So you don't actually, when you're sleeping and you're kind of like very intoxicated, for a little while during your sleep, you actually don't recover like you would if you were to go through like a deep sleep pattern, where you're not getting regeneration into your tissues, joints, and all that other stuff like we're having it too.
To kind of break it down, like I've always like thought about it, like it kind of almost blocks that deep sleep that we need to be able to recover, right? So we have like all of our stages of sleep, and the deepest of those is that REM sleep. That's kind of where we dream and those kind of things. And oftentimes when we drink, it blocks that. So we don't necessarily get those benefits of full recovery. And that again leads to that next day not performing, and even the days following, depending on how much we drank and things like that, and how well we then sleep the next night and the night after that, with all that happening in our body. So just kind of blocking that out creates all those disadvantages as well.
Yeah, and this is something that like one or two drinks might not have as big of an effect, but it certainly could affect like your body's water intake and performance in a way like that, recovery. But when you're getting like those 3 or more, 4 or more in a sitting, like that could definitely hamper. And it might be something where you want to take like a couple days off, especially if you're a serious athlete. Most of us are what we would call like amateur athletes. Like we just want to work out, we just want to play. We're not doing this professionally. But if you take your playtime seriously, it might be something to consider about when you want to have those drinks. If there's going to be a night where it's kind of overloaded a little bit, right? There's a lot. There's a lot more that we can kind of go in depth with on that, but we necessarily won't. I just know that there's a lot of like crazy good research out there that shows, like basically there's this one study out there that shows these people did 300, like the machine where you sit down and kind of extend your legs out and like it fires up your quads, the top of your legs. They did like 300 of those eccentrically. So they kicked it out and then they went slow on the way down. So that's already hell, by the way. 300, like 20 of those eccentrically is hell. They did 300. Okay. So they're already getting crushed. But they took half of this group and they put them through, they gave them orange juice for like a post-workout thing. And the other half had a ton of alcohol, so they got smashed, like they got crushed. Like it'd be like if it were me, the equivalent for my weight right now would be like having 6 good beers, like 12-ounce beers, right? And it was in like a shorter amount of span. Like they got hammered, and they brought them back 36 hours later and 60 hours later, and the performance of those people that had the alcohol compared to the orange juice was significantly lower than the people who had the orange juice, like way like 15% or more on like performance standards, which is enormous when it comes down to thinking like if you're a professional athlete of sorts, or if you take your stuff seriously, like that's the difference of you getting like a minute on something, right, to accomplish something, and you getting a minute 15 seconds, or you dropping, well, that's not really actually true, but you get my point. 15, yeah, we'll go with that. But anyways, there's a 50% drop off in performance or more. So like that's usually something that
big numbers,
big numbers that you want to take into consideration.
For sure. Performance recovery.
Recovery, all of that good stuff. Fat suppressing. Going through that. There's a lot of different you brought something up earlier. There's a lot of different reasons why we consume alcohol. Okay. And there's a lot of different ways that we all do it. You brought up one is like a social outreach, social gathering side of things. One thing that I've really taken upon myself, because that's obviously a thing that our age group, by the way, is like really pushing this craft beer and craft spirit phenomenon that's going on in the industry and in the world. Right, like our age group, the millennials and throughout that are really pushing this small batch type of stuff that is getting a lot of people a lot of money, but also making us very happy. So a lot of our time socially is with this type of stuff. One thing that I've really taken into consideration of me personally is that when college, like we were almost keeping track of how many drinks we could drink in a night, right? Like there was how many Busch Lights did you drink last night? How many Bud Lights was it? Where now it's kind of like, there's no way I do that today. Probably have some friends that still do it. But I drink super slow. It was my point. And it's enjoying the taste of the beer and really taking in the flavors and doing that, because that's what the beer is actually made for. These beers and these craft drinks aren't meant to be crushed. Okay, they're meant to be consumed, but enjoyed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think like kind of to touch on like myself personally as well, like even when I was in college, I'm someone like I don't love the feeling of being like tipsy or drunk. Like I just don't like it. And if you know me and like how much I like being like in control, especially of myself, like that makes total sense. But I just don't like it. Jordan's over here laughing because I'm sure he knows. But yeah, I just don't like it. So when I do drink, like it's always for that enjoyment factor. So that was something like when I was younger, like in college and stuff, it was weird because the people did have like, let's go out and just drink. And I'm like, why? Like, it doesn't make sense to me because I didn't enjoy that part. So I think now it's kind of paid off. Whereas like now I'm already like many of my friends are in that as well, where like if we're going to go out to drink, it's going to I always choose something that like I really enjoy the taste of. If I don't like it, like I'll always ask. I'm that person. Like I always ask to sample it before I before I have like make my decision. If it's a craft beer or something. But always kind of choosing that quality over the quantity, kind of making those drinks last a little bit longer, like Jordan said, drinking them and really enjoying the taste of it and keeping that in mind for like the reason why you're drinking, because you truly enjoy it, not just because, you know, that social aspect. Like we don't, it's easy to get sucked into that of like everyone else is drinking, like I gotta drink too. But just kind of keeping in mind why you're choosing to drink in that situation, whatever it may be. So
that's a good point. Like bringing that awareness and that mindfulness right back to it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's coming up through there. There's so much more that we could go into detail on, but I think
Mm-hmm.
we gave you more of like from our standpoint as fitness coaches and what we kind of coach here, Unity Fitness, and what it pertains to alcohol. I think we kind of gave you an idea of what we're talking about, and it's certainly okay in moderation, especially when you're, like, to quote her, like being in control. If you feel like you're losing some of that control, like it's probably not going to be a great thing. But knowing like where you're at, how you're doing, if you have something like performance-wise coming up, stronger than yesterday challenge, right?
Yeah.
We got to be careful how much we're drinking, because that performance then could decline over multiple days. Like I told you, that study was 60 hours. That's almost 3 full days later. Like they take professional athletes. Like if that happens to professional athletes, like they tell them to take a few days off, right? There's teams that hate when their players are at these nightclubs at like 2 a.m. on a Friday night and they're playing football on Sunday. Read between the lines and the tabloids, and you'll see that there's a few NFL players that get away with that. And I would love to say that those teams are probably giving them some blood work to see like if there's anything left in the system, because like game day Sunday, when they're an asset to the company, millions of dollars, and they can't play at their best, probably not a good scenario.
Problems.
Yeah. So
sure.
So it's a huge thing like on that side too. A lot of us think about that because we don't really need to care about it unless our team loses. You know, then it's a little bit bigger deal. Maybe that's why there's some teams out there that are so bad all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. As a Bills fan, you know, the Bills Mafia does their own thing, I suppose.
You know what? That's
Hopefully
why the Packers have been bad. That's why the Packers have been bad. They're all drinking.
Yeah.
All drinking. But yeah, I think that gives you guys an idea of like what we're coming from in terms of fat suppressing, appetite control, cortisol, the couple health benefits from it cardiovascularly, like the red wine and the nitric oxide stuff. Sleep and recovery are a huge one from that.
Sure.
Underhydration, like there was a lot of topics that we went through, and how to manage it. Like you got the serving sizes from Emily, you got the intake from Emily. Tips on it are to drink slow, follow each drink with a glass of water. Our Super Bowl one is one that we took from Joel Sanders of Exos is drink the first, have your glass of water, sip the second, have a glass of water, and the third is don't be an asshole, right? So that third one seems to be like kind of like that magic number that really throws people over this edge of performance, recovery, intoxication side of things. Like there's a lot more that goes into it like that.
For sure. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. I don't think there's anything else like I want to add. Just like I said, just being mindful of it, I think, is the biggest thing. And just
Thank
being
you.
aware.
Yeah.
I think like it's not like alcohol isn't going away. Like it's the only, especially the craft beer, like it just seems to continue to grow, and it's always going to kind of be there. So by no means do you have to like give it up in pursuits of a, you know, general fitness goal. But I think just being aware and recognizing those trade-offs when they happen, and being mindful when you consume it. So
yeah. So guys, there's a lot of you that watched today, like a ton. Like we have to scroll up to see how many people that were on this at one point, which is pretty stinking awesome. Maybe we should do more 4-week hiatuses more often. No, we won't. We'll be back next week. Don't know what we're talking about yet because we're kind of considering this a new season now that we're back on track for the summer. But we'll be back next week on Thursday. Look out for that topic later next week. As all, thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show.
Guys. Yeah, absolutely. No
we
problem.
appreciate that. If you guys have any future questions, don't be shy. Comment on them below and let us know what you want us to talk about or what we can help you answer. We'll post some stuff later on about that infographic that Emily saw.
We'll fill that link up.
Yeah. It's another good precision nutrition infographic article that really speaks on a level that we understand as coaches, but it also helps you understand as the as the general population, if you will, where the language in it is very easy to understand and read because they do such a good job at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, now you kind of know a little bit more about alcohol, or maybe you just had a reaffirmation of it all. Okay. As always, guys, thanks for watching the Community Fitness Podcast. We'll see you next week, Thursday at noon. Until then, enjoy the weather, take care, and be mindful of your alcohol intake.
Thanks, guys.
Boom, 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 and